YouTube, we are back with the tier list again, and here we go. Now, again, this is my pre-Casey Cup tier list. I'll be playing Friday and Sunday, not Saturday because I'm going to be out. So we'll be doing this Friday and Sunday, and we'll see how far we get. The next Casey Cup, I want to go super hard, but I got to go out for my birthday. I have a family birthday coming up, so my not family birthday, my birthday is coming up, and my family wants me to go out, so I am doing that. So keep that in mind. I will also try to get back late Saturday night, and we'll see if we can stream then and continue. But anyway, all right, on to the Casey Cup tier list. All right. So first thing is first. As can I know? All right, Agent. Agent is sewage waste. Yes, yes, yes. This deck is absolute sewage waste. It is dead. It's not coming back. It got its skill hit. It got everything hit. Yeah, nobody's playing this deck. In stage 2, it's just not happening, kids. Yeah, nobody wants this in stage 2. It's just not a good deck. The skill got hit. No more floodgate. Oop. Sorry about that. Yeah, no more floodgate. And yeah, that's about that. Okay. Next, Buster Blader. We'll put this in about a cog meme. I think that this deck is, it goes first. Buster Blader Defleur. It sets up, its unbreakable field. I mean, granted, it ends on an unbreakable field. But again, going second, I don't know how strong it is. Maybe it's at the back end of Rogue. Maybe this gets to the back end of Rogue. But right now, that's kind of where I feel like it is. But basically, turn 1, you set up your Buster Blader Synchro, turns your opponent all in the dragons, which is really strong considering Lyric can't summon like Swallow with it on the field. And some of the things need Wing Beast in order to extend. But overall, like I said, back end of Rogue, and the deck can lose hard to drop with as well. So back end of Rogue right now. Alright, next. And Valor it could also lose to as well. That's something else. It could also lose to Effect Valor as well. So just keep that in mind. Okay. Next is Chronomaly. Chronomaly is high-end Cogme, backest end of Rogue. I wouldn't be shocked if someone did really well in this deck. So you know what? I'm going to put this at Rogue. By the way, just to go over what the tier list is. Tier 1, I expect about, maybe 20, 25 people topping with that one deck or more. Maybe like 25 to 35 people topping with the tier 1 deck. Tier 2, I expect maybe like, I'd say at about 100 people topping. I would say about maybe like 15 to 20 top with it. So you're about now, what, 55? Yeah, so about 20, and then we said 35, so 55. Tier 3, about maybe 15. Well, actually, Tier 1 should be more. Tier 1 should be about 45, 50 people topping. Tier 2 should be about 20 people topping. Tier 3 should be about maybe 10 to 15 people topping. So that would be 70 and 85. And then about 15 for Rogue decks and other unaccountable things that we talk about. So, yeah. Right now, Rogue, I have Chronomaly. And, yeah, that's what I feel about that. And when I say topping, I mean overall discussing those decks. And I mean overall about discussing those topping overall. So like if you have like Star, Seraph, and Leolisk in a certain tier, for instance, then that would account for the number I said combined together. So like for instance, like 35 or 55 combined between both those two decks. That's what I feel. Alright, yeah, but Chronomaly back end of Rogue. So back end of Rogue, I feel like there's a chance. When I say Rogue, I mean a chance for people to top, that one of these decks may end up topping. That's what I feel like the strongest chance that one of these decks may end up topping. Doesn't mean they're gonna top, but the strongest chance for it too. Cogme memes maybe in a rare chance that it tops. One of these top, very rare, means the deck is pretty much not good at all. And then Sewage Waste means don't even play it at all. But Cogme is pretty much almost don't play it at all. But Sewage Waste completely don't play it at all. But anyway, like I said, Chronomaly, back end of Rogue, that's pretty much where it is. Like I said, a few people did well with it World, so I'll give it in the Rogue category. Like I said, the deck is not bad, but it's not great either. The good thing about it is the negate doesn't target for Vimana. So if you would activate Vimana in response to Nightingale detaching a material, somehow if they don't detach in a draw phase, you'd be able to negate. But they just detach in a draw phase, and then you're pretty much in a bad spot anyway. But at that point, for you going second into them. But going first, you can negate. The negates might actually do something like negating, Cobalt to revive back, say, not Cobalt, negating like a Turquoise to revert back a Cobalt, or a Celestine might be useful. And, you could do things. But overall, I don't think it's the strongest deck right now. But overall, it's decent. Next is Dark Fluid. Dark Fluid, I do think, is like a very high rogue deck. Almost tier 3. I'm going to put it tier 3. Because there is, back end of tier 3, because there is one thing it does not lose to, and that is Book of Eclipse. Book of Eclipse is very, very strong, and so is cards like Cyber's Quantum Dragon. Maybe at that point I'll put it to the front of tier 3, now that I think about it, talk about it more. So, like, cards like Cyber's Quantum Dragon, Book of Eclipse, they don't really affect Dark Fluid. Droplet does, however, and that is a crucial hitting point to the deck. That's why it's not higher than it is. And also, Effect Veiler could be devastating depending on what the hand is. And people are playing Veiler, and they are playing DD Crow, which DD Crow isn't the most impactful card in the Dark Fluid matchup. It can stop the combo, it can slow down the combo, but like nothing like an extender can't really fix. So, overall, I think that Dark Fluid is a tier 3 deck. It's really good in a pilot who knows how to play its hands. Like I said, you really need to know how to pilot this deck well. It is not the easiest deck to pilot because the combo takes so long, so you have to be really fast on the combos, and you really have to know how you're breaking your opponent's board on turn 2. So, like I said, not the easiest deck to pilot, but I do expect a few tops with this deck. I do. I think like 2 to 3 people could top with Dark Fluid. So I will say that Dark Fluid is a really solid tier 3 option. So, like I said, but it takes a lot of experience and know how to play the deck. Okay. Alright, what is this? Earthbound Immortal is Sewage Waste. This deck is not good. There is a meme version that can hand rip your opponent, but overall, like, that's a meme, and this deck just does not do anything, really. It's just not good. It's a cheesy meme OTK deck, but yeah, don't play this. In the case, you just simply don't. If you want to do well, do not play this deck. Alright. Fluffle. Fluffle is Sewage Waste. Yes, this deck is Sewage Waste too. Look, I really want Fluffle to do something, but overall, it's just not going to do anything because, again, Lyralist, which I'm going to hint it is going to be a high-ranked deck, it just says no to this deck. Like, this deck, Lyralist does not care about Dweller. If birds end on Assemble Nightingale, you're not OTKing them. You can't destroy them. And you cannot target them. Now, granted, Fluffle do have forms of untargetable removal, I believe so. But, again, like, I think Kraken non-target sends. But the problem is, and I'm not sure if Whale non-target sends, but the problem is that you can't OTK them. And if you're not OTKing your opponent, they're just going to come back and kill you on the follow-up. That's legitimately the problem. Like, Lyra just hard counters this deck, and this deck was already in a bad spot, but it's even in a worse spot. And also, Dweller really hurts because you can't use Wings in the graveyard. You won't get your Penguin. So a deck like Star Seraph, if they saw this deck, they would just go and counter you with Abyss Dweller. So, like, a lot of counters to this deck, although I give it, and because you're playing Sora and you're playing, a skill that is non-archive, just a generic skill, then they're going to know you're playing this deck and they're going to go into whatever counters you. So, with that being said, yes, this deck is not good. Alright, next. Infernoble Knight. Now, Infernobles are rogue. High tier rogue. They are not top tier anymore. Now, the interesting note is that they can end on, I know a lot of them, some of them have been trying to end on Chimbara. Not Chimbara, Hagoida, which Hagoida can help stop birds from Exceed summoning. But here's the problem. The problem is, to get to a 3 disruption field, you generally need a 3-card combo that involves Astafilo. And the other issue is going first. Book of Eclipse really hurts in for Noble Knights, which really knocked us down a lot of tiers. And also Droplet, which is all over the place, is another killer for the deck. So you're talking about 6 and 30 cards, so going first really doesn't feel safe anymore. So overall, I just don't think the deck is the most optimal choice for KC Cup. I would expect that maybe 1, maybe 2 might top with this deck. It's at the highest end of Rogue, but again, like I said, you really have to be dedicated to want to do well with this deck, because I just think that with Eclipse and Droplet, it's going to get very frustrating, and those cards could just auto-lose you the game, and I just don't think the deck is very, very good right now. But it's at high Rogue for me until, like, one of these cards. But like I said, if Droplet gets, if, like, they nerf Book of Eclipse ever, then this deck could skyrocket again. But right now, it's just not in a spot to be top tier at the very moment. Okay, now, next is Performage. And Performage is another Rogue deck, mid-Rogue. Again, this deck is not bad. It's not a bad deck. The problem is that Star Seraph just did everything that Performage does on a much better level. It can OTK a lot easier than, well, I shouldn't say OTK a lot easier, but the turn 1 is a lot better in Star Seraph than it is in Performage. That's the reality. Is that, you know, setting 3 back row is likely going to win you the game, and you have a skill that just summons 2 bodies for free. Like I said, Performage is not a bad deck. If they hit Star Seraph, Performage will be top tier again. But for now, Star Seraph is the premier Dweller deck, and it is better than Performage. And simply reason why. Not that Performage is bad, it's just Star Seraph is better. Alright, Phantom Knight. Phantom Knight, please excuse the repeats that I put on here. We're just going to skip those. I clicked on them wrong twice. So, yeah. Phantom Knight is mid-low Rogue. Again, I wouldn't exit the idea that somebody does top with this, because this deck can play Droplet, and it cannot play Eclipse because Torn Scales is at 3. If it could play Eclipse, it would be a lot stronger, I feel, or better. I don't think, I think the other issue with this is, like I said, if you go up against Borrel, then, which is also top tier, you could lose to Lancia, which is another issue, but overall, this deck is mid-rogue for me. I think, like I said, I wouldn't exit the idea of someone topping with it, but again, you can't make Ophion. The turn 1 is kind of eh. I mean, they now end on Alchemic Magician, where they could set a tech card from their deck and end on Requiem. So, like, overall, it's solid. But is it really good? Probably not. Not the best. But it's okay. Prank Kids is Sewage Waste. This deck is not good. This deck just simply is not good. The Konami, we need the support. It needs Meow Moo or some skill that's going to buff it in some sort of way, because the deck is just not good. It's tiresome to bring this up every time, but it's just not good. Phantasmal Spiral is a cog meme. Now, this deck is a deck that I don't think will top. Like I said, very rare chance that somebody tops with this, but overall, a lot of the time, your opponent will have no idea what you're doing, and you have the field spell on the field that, I forget what it's called, but Pacifist, yeah, that allows you to activate your trap setting and start popping your opponent's monsters. And there were Blue Eyes builds a long while ago that was mixed with this. Overall, I just don't think the deck is good enough, and going second is probably painful as heck. I'm not the biggest expert on the deck, but overall, it just doesn't seem that strong to me, and I would probably put this a cog meme. I wouldn't have completely erased the idea of someone topping with this, but But right now, not the best spot. Raid Raptor is cog meme. Again, rare chance that this tops, but it's not out of the woods that someone would top with this deck. I would say it's completely out of the woods. But overall, it's just going up against like 3 disruptions is going to be tough. And the turn 1 is really good, but the turn 2 is kind of iffy. That's kind of the issue right now. And again, Raid Raptor is a deck that kind of wants to OTK. So Birds, starting up your ability to OTK, not looking great. But overall, I'm going to put this to high side. I'm going to put this at low rogue. I'm going to do this for you guys. I think low rogue. I can see some really good strengths about it, but there's a lot of really good weaknesses. Again, Time Thief might be just the better version of Raid Raptor, in the sense that it ends on a ton of disruptions, but also might have a slightly better shot at going second. So, lowest end of rogue for now. Sacred Beast is tier 3. This deck is still strong because turn 1 you end on the Floodgate. Your Tyrant's Throws just negate all your opponent's monsters' effects from activating. And then going second, you still have Forbidden Droplet. And nothing is hit to 3 in Sacred Beast, so you can run Eclipse as well. So being able to run Droplet and Eclipse, this deck is actually really solid. The problem is the deck just doesn't have a ton of follow-ups. So like if you get stopped at both parts of the skill, then you're probably already in a bad spot. Because the Summoning Beast can only summon from the hand. So if your 2 Sacred Beast summons get stopped, then you're in a bad spot. And also Veil are really hard counters this deck. But overall, it's a tier 3 deck. It can do well going first and do well, very well going second. So tier 3. Shark is bottom tier 2, I would say. I don't think this deck is hit hard as people think, because you have Utopia Ray Lancer. And Lancer is very good against Nightingale because simply it doesn't target on negate and it can negate your opponent's board. The problem is that Crow, they can search DD Crow. So like this is like almost money. This might be a bit high. The problem is maybe Ahead of Dark Fluid is just the best tier 3 deck. Because people will top with this. People will top with this. I think there will be some tops with this. Like 2 or 3. I think I'm going to put this at like the highest end of tier 3. The problem is DD Crow exists, which is a problem for the deck, because then you can just, like, Leerless can just search it. And, you know, Droplet does exist. So, you know, Dropletting their field, if they're relying on a more aggressive build with Amnesties and Lances. Because not a lot of builds run Neo Ceiling anymore can hurt more, I would say. So I would put this at like tier 2 for now. And also Dweller doesn't do anything to Leerless. That's another problem. Other than like stop Celestine in the graveyard from attaching. It's not really doing too much. So, you know, tier 3. Top of tier 3. Super Quantums are a really good rogue deck. I'm going to put this even ahead of Infernal Knights. I don't know about that. Somewhere in here. That might be a little bit too much. No, I wouldn't put this ahead of. Probably right here. Super Quants are a really good rogue deck. The problem is they do hard lose to Valor. Like, really hard lose to Valor. And Disruption going second. So, going second, they can lose to a good amount of Disruption. Like, if you stop White Layer and that's all they have, then it's a really bad thing. Because then they're probably not playing the game. Overall, like, the deck going into Magnus turn 1 is obviously really strong. The other problem is, Leerless do not care about Magnus. However, you could just wait until they assemble Nightingale and then just hit the Nightingale. The other problem is Magnus is a hard once because it doesn't target. The other problem is Magnus is a hard once per turn. So like the problem is even if you hit Nightingale, they can still OTK you. Because if you go to hit Nightingale, then they could extend into like 2 copies of what's the thing? Recital Starling, and then Chain Nightingale when you activate the effect to shuffle in. And then probably OTK you even after that, and then OTK you by slamming into Great Magnus. So overall, like, it's strong, but I think hand traps will weaken it. But if you're really dedicated to the deck, like I know my boy Vince Baca is, you can do well in the deck. But like I said, I'm gonna leave it like mid-tier rogue. Sun Avalon is probably highest tier rogue. I think this deck is very slept on, and I've seen a lot of the Japanese players trying it out. The new skill can gain you an insane amount of life, and if you're not careful and you do not know how to play against this deck, they can and will beat you. Another thing is, Dry Trenchier will negate. I mean, not Dry Trenchier. Bloom will negate your whole field. So Sun Avalon Bloom is really, really powerful. Because Bloom can just negate without targeting, and again, much like Utopic Ray Lancer, can put your opponent in a bad spot in Leerless if they are in that kind of position. And the deck, with the right build, can also play through back row considerably well. So I'm going to put them at the highest tier rogue. I'm almost convinced to put them at like the lowest tier. I'm going to put them at the lowest tier 3. I'm going to take kind of a high dice roll pick and say that somebody's going to do really well on this. So keep this in the back of your mind. Unchained is another deck that is up here. And I might put Shark back at the bottom of tier 2. Bottom tier 2 is almost tier 3, but it's like slightly better than I think some people might top with it or whatever. Some people more top with it, maybe like 4 tops with it. Abomination, Unchained is a really, really good tier 3 deck at the moment. I think that people do sleep on this deck. It can run IDP, which is really strong. It can run Kaijus that can out Leerless. And again, that the only problem is like going second into them is a little bit like if you don't draw those techs, it's kind of hard. Like if you go second and you don't draw the tech cards, then it can be really hard to win, and then they're almost guaranteed going to beat you. But overall, the deck it's solid. It's solid. Seraph is a bad matchup for it, but that's kind of the risk you take. With Seraph. It's kind of a bad matchup for it. But they can play through it. Like, it really depends on what Seraph opens. But the back row Seraph plays now, I think, is more favorable for Unchained to do well. So I will leave this because they're mostly on, like, Droplets now. And they're on Book of Eclipse, which, again, is better than them having to deal with Crackdown. So I will put, for this reason, I will put Unchained at tier 3. Okay. Next, also Infernoble going down is a boost to Unchained as well, because going second at Infernoble is also very tough for Unchained. Ancient Warriors is a cog meme. This deck is, like I said, one person tops with this. I wouldn't be the most absolute shock, because, again, they have outs to Nightingale, but, like, going second in Disruption is kind of up in the air, and it really depends on how you open with this deck for it to do well. You have a trap that just ends the battle phase too, which is actually really kind of neat. But overall, again, like going second to Disruption is kind of like up in the air. So yeah, for that reason, I'm gonna put this here. Balderrock is another rogue deck that kind of goes ahead of Infernobles. Balderrock Defleur, because again, another Defleur build, but this version I like more than the Buster version in terms of what it could do. And the only thing is like Veiler, Droplet, those are gonna be your enemies. But again, Balderrock being a zombie world, just stopping, zombie world kind of countering alone some of what birds do. And Balderrock, non-target banish the Nightingale is pretty good. So I will leave it there. Borrel Link is a strong tier 2 deck. It is the highest ranked deck we've done so far. Borrel Link is very powerful, simply because it is, I almost want to put this at tier 1 almost. You know what? Screw it. We'll have a 3 tier 1. This deck is still very powerful because this deck does have outs to Nightingale. So you have Magna Rocket Dragon, you have Borrel Dragon, you have Silver Rocket ripping out of the extra deck turn 1. This deck is a Seraph counter, so it does well in Seraph. So this deck again is pretty strong. The only problem is, like I said, going first, it does have its inconsistencies with having the Silver Rocket rip and whatnot, but overall, it is probably the weaker of the tier 1 decks, but is tier 1 in my mind. Next is Constellar, and this deck is a cog meme. Alright? Go first, you win. Go second. I mean, you open up hand traps, I guess you can win, but if you don't open up hand traps, I don't know what to tell you. And one hand trap against Bird isn't really stopping them. And you don't have a light or dark monster you're swinging into, so you're not going to be able to really gain benefits off Caduceus. So that's a problem and a half. So yeah, I don't think this deck is top tier. I think it's cog meme right now. Would somebody top with this? Probably not. I'd probably even put this behind here. I don't even know. Like, you go back and forth with these two. I don't know. I don't think anyone's really going to top with this. Dogmatica Pure is a cog meme. I don't know. Well, Pure by itself is a cog meme. Dogmatica is kind of alright. Should have differentiated this a bit more. I will once I talk about the other decks. I did differentiate it, but Dogmatica Pure is not good because, like, what it does turn 1 by itself is not enough, but nobody's really playing Pure Dogmatica. So, like, you know, Pure by itself, like, just the Dogmatica deck is probably a cog meme. If you mix it with Charmers, it gets a bit stronger, maybe back end of Rogue. But the other builds of Dogmatica are much stronger, and we'll talk about those. Okay, now next, Gaia. Gaia is high tier rogue. Gaia is a decent deck. Turn 1 can actually be really strong if you use the Witch of the Black Forest engine. But other than if you're not using it, then the turn 1's iffy. And the turn 2 can be kind of explosive, like Spiral Fusion, being able to fuse out of the graveyard. But, you know, people do sleep on this deck. It's okay. I don't think an Envoy can also help going second. I still think there are... you know, Gaia overall, I still think struggles a bit in the meta, but you know, it's okay. I might kind of back and forth here. Let's see here. All right, next, Cosmo. Cosmo is actually probably low tier rogue, and I'm going to tell you why. And it's because Cosmojo does not target, and they can run IDP. Simply, the deck can do okay into birds now. I wouldn't say great, because again, you need to draw the tech cards. And again, like I said, if you're going second, it's not really looking great for you, and you have to OTK them that turn. And Dark Destroyer cannot blow up anything on the field. But overall, it's okay. I would say Bach and Rogue. It's moving up in the world. Alright, next is birds. Lyrilusk is the best deck of the format. I'm not going to lie to you when I say that this deck is not the best deck of the format, because everything else, if you go on the ladder, if you look in tournaments, a lot of people are trying to chase it. A good indicator to figure out what the best deck of the format is when everybody is chasing that deck or trying to counter that deck. I see a lot of people playing, well, I didn't include this, but, well, like any DeFleur build that makes, should have probably just included all these DeFleur builds, but I didn't write this down, but we'll talk about it. One card that you can see very, very, very much in the KC Cup is Bishbalkin. So if you use Bishbalkin counters the floor. People are playing Bishbalkin because Bishbalkin counters Lyrilusk. So everyone's trying to counter Lyrilusk with that. People are running 3 Droplet and 3 Book of Eclipse to counter Lyrilusk and Star Seraph, changing the build to counter that. So you can kind of see how everyone's just like geared to beating this deck. Now that tells you this is the best deck in the format, and everybody is frightened of the deck. So it is tier 1. The deck is very scary going first and going second. The deck pretty much does whatever it needs to do to survive turn 1 with Robin and ending on your Assembled Nightingale. But going second is where this deck gets really terrifying, because there is a lot of ways, like with Lance and MST that people are playing, to go second and to get through back row. Also making untargetable monsters, so it forces out your opponent's disruptions early. It is a very terrifying deck to face, hence why it is the best deck in the game. And there is a little bit of skill base behind it, but most of the point, it's not the most difficult deck to learn. Magic Spectre is Cogni. This deck is not good. It's go first or lose. It really is. And for that reason, by itself, it's just a plain Cogni. It's not good on its own, and it just struggles. The trap is at 1 for, I have no idea why, but maybe Konami thought it gets out of the end, but it needs some more support. Mayakashi, oh my gosh. I'm gonna put this as a Cogni. Mayakashi is taking a dip here. It is taking a dip. The reason why it is taking a dip, I feel bad for putting it this low, but I just don't think, other than Borrel, it just doesn't really do anything well in this format. That's the problem. That is the problem. Like I said, I wouldn't be shocked if someone topped with it. The problem is that I feel like Mayakashi, other than to counter Rocket, just doesn't do well. Maybe I'll put it at the end of bottom of road, but it is like, the problem is like, if you go second at the bird, you can't out Nightingale. Like, well, I guess they can, but like with the trap. But alright, I'll put him at bottom of rogue. But even then, like the problem is you need to have access to the trap, and it needs to be the lowest on the field. Like if your opponent's smart and they know you're playing Maya, which they will because your skill triggers, then they can just like barrel Canary, boost it up, and make it not the lowest on the field. Like somebody got with Canary and then reducing everything else that's on the field. But I'll leave it for now at the lowest tier of Rogue. I don't think it's going to do that well. Maybe one person tops with it, but, you know. Alright, the way that the floor is, again, this deck is kind of cool. I can see this deck being like a low tier Rogue deck. Simply because this deck is, you know, can make like Bishbal, can like actually make Bishbalkin, but will also do like a lot of cool things, and they have it out that non-target sends, you know, the Nightingale and the whole field to the graveyard, which gets around everything. The issue is they really need Stake Raid to pop off, and other than that, it's like in the air, but it's really, really cool. It's a deck I would really like to try out, because it's actually really cool. Okay, next is Ra, and Ra is a Cogme. This deck is not great. I'll be real, it's almost Sewage Waste. It actually is Sewage Waste. Almost. I don't know. I can get to the back row. Alright, I'll put it as a Cogme. I'm not putting it that low, but it's a Cogme. The reason why is because you may think, oh, untargetable board breaker. Why wouldn't you want to play Ra? And it's because somebody is going to, because Lyralist can search the bird, DD Crow. And the minute you go into Phoenix, the minute you try to reborn from your graveyard, the Ra, you're going to get crowed. And the duel is over. The deck can search Crow, and you may say, oh, wait, but don't they need a 3-card combo, as you said in your video? Yeah, if they care to end on Ensemble. If they don't care to end on Ensemble, which if you're playing Ra, they're not going to care about because they don't care about bouncing your special summon monsters. All they're going to do is they're just going to search DD Crow, and they're just going to get rid of your graveyard. And then Kahoot, you're dead. So, you know, I mean, then you're kind of like in a bad spot. I mean, you're dead at that point. So, you know, there is that. The only chance you have, I think, is to play Dark Spell Regeneration to get through it. I think even Ensemble bouncing Ra, I'm not 100% sure about this, that also works, and then it stops you from summoning Phoenix mode. So, yeah, I don't think this is the answer that everyone's looking for. So, I'm going to put Ra as a Cogme. I'm not going to put it as Sewage Waste because I do think that it's a rare shot, but someone might top with this. Alright. Anyway, one person maybe. Alright, so Star Seraph is tier 1. Let me get all the way up there. This deck is very, very strong. It runs Droplet. It runs Eclipse. It can draw 3 turn 1. It can OTK. The 9th extra deck slot gives this deck such a buff because before it was like, you know, people were struggling to fit the Utopia Ray package in, but now everyone's running Utopia Ray. I mean, not Utopia Ray, but Utopia Leo Ray. But that makes it so strong because now you have a 5,000 monster that you can just summon with 2 bodies and OTK the heck out of your opponent and get a negate. So, you know, this is a really, really potent deck. It plays through back row. It can go first. It's right behind Lyralist, the best deck. And it's an easy-to-use skill. It's Glurath, and you can see why it is one of the best decks. Shadol. Shadol is... Oh, if I put Sun Avalon there, I kind of have to. Yeah. Alright. Shadol is right there with Sun Avalon as bottom of tier 3. Now, depending on how many people orchestrate their Lyralist builds, whether they play the negate spell or not, Shadol could actually become top tier again. And the reason why is Shadol can do really well in the birds. They can start playing the Light Kaiju. They can run Droplet. They can run Super Poly. All those cards out birds. And you know what else is non-targetable removal? Shadol Schism, which can out by summoning Wendigo, the Nightingale. So overall, and Gravity Con can also be an annoying card for them because GravCon can out a monster in the EMC without targeting. So overall, Shadol has reason to show some promise. I think it is bottom of tier 3, and I think it is decent enough that we should consider it to be some people to be topping with Shadol because it would not shock me if 2 people actually did top this deck. Actually, I shouldn't say it would not shock me. I think 2 people or so will actually top this deck. Sky Striker. Sky Striker is a rogue deck. This deck has a terrible matchup with the birds. It could do well in everything else, but it has a terrible matchup with the birds because if birds are the focus of the meta, then becoming untargetable and indestructible pretty much shuts down any way that Sky Striker can out Nightingale. They really can't. Unless your opponent is bad and puts in the EMC, then in that case you could use Vector Blast to do it. But if your opponent's not bad, then you're not outing the Nightingale. Other than that, this deck can do decently in everything else in the meta. It actually counters Shark, it actually counters Seraph, and it could actually have a good matchup in the Borrel. So giving you a lot of reason to consider this deck being a good deck in the meta and to be at the forefront. So at that level, I'm putting it as top of Rogue right now. I don't want to put it at bottom of tier 3, but top of Rogue. Actually, you know, I am going to put it bottom of tier 3. I am. Actually, I am. I have to be fair, because there can be like 1 or 2 people that actually do top of this deck. So I will put this at the bottom of tier 3. I will. Alright. Shiranui. Shiranui is actually a decent Rogue deck. I don't think this deck is like meta or anything, but it can run Veiler. You can run Droplet. You can run cards that can interact with your opponent. If the floor becomes the focus of the meta, you can even run like Veiler, Crow, and a bunch of ant traps that counter them. And Shiranui Samurai also outs the Nightingale. So overall, like I said, Shiranui is actually decent. I'm going to put it here. I think it can actually do pretty well in a good pilot's hand. So, yeah, I'll leave it there for now. Gunkin Suship is high Rogue. This deck is decent. However, I don't think it's top tier, but I think it's quite decent. It can make the gates. You can add a big board turn 1. Turn 2, you can buy Droplet Eclipse that can help you break boards. But yeah, that's where I think it is right now. Tagyod is a Gog meme. Yes, this deck is not great, but right now it's Cog meme. It could do okay, but overall it's Cog meme. It's fine, but going second's a lot harder now. And they really can't OTK birds because you're not threatening the Omni Negate until they activate Nightingale. So for that reason, I'm leaving it there. Tenyi. Tenyi is bottom Rogue, maybe. I don't know. Cog meme. I don't know. Maybe somebody off Win tops with this. Again, you need the really good ants to do well. It can run IDP. But overall, like, I don't know what this deck is really doing in the birds if you don't draw IDP. But, I mean, I guess you could Draco Berserker. If they play the Draco Berserker, then you could banish the Nightingale. But, like I said, they really have to play the Draco Berserker for that to happen. But, otherwise, I don't really see it. TJ is... oh, no. Maybe they start running Trish 0. Maybe they have it out, but... oh, Robert's going to counter it. They could still... Gnomes doesn't really do anything there. Alright. TG has hit Sewage Waste. It pains me to say this. It pains me, but... I don't know if this deck is really worth playing. Maybe it's a bottom cog meme. Maybe it's Sewage Waste. I don't know, but... maybe... oh, I don't know. I mean, maybe you could do something against Seraph. Maybe it'll do decently to Seraph or Borrel. But... I don't know. And the turn 1 ain't great either. Yeah, it's Sewage Waste. Sorry, TG. You had your run, but you've hit the bottom of the barrel. And I wouldn't recommend playing this deck in the KC Cup if you want to do well. But, you know, yeah, unfortunate. Time Thief is tier 3. It is a very good deck. I would actually... I put it ahead of everything else, honestly. Move it like this. Yeah, that's fine. Overall, Time Thief is... probably change it this way. Time Thief is really, really solid because the deck has an insane turn 1. And going second, you can actually play Delirious, which is Book of Eclipse or Droplet. So overall, this deck does decently Delirious. It actually has a decent matchup with the Rocket. I expect a good 5 or 6 people might top with this deck. I mean, I'm gonna be real with you. Like, it's a really good deck. And people are like heavily sleeping on this. It may be even more. I might even put this to tier 2. Yeah, I might even put this to tier 2. It's kind of like flirting. There are some decks, like the problem is back rows really struggles going into tier 3. I would say this flirts around tier 3 to tier 2, depending on how the meta shapes up. So, somewhere around here. Windwitch is tier 3. Bottom of it. This deck is okay. It's good, but it has no follow. People will do well with this in the KC Cup if they really focus on playing Windwitch. It's not possible to deal well. I expect maybe 1 to 2 people to top with this deck, but I don't think it's going to be insane. Simply because the deck just lacks follow-up, and it can lose to Eclipse, and it can lose to Droplet. It's kind of the same reason Inferno will do, but I think, I don't know. Maybe it's like High Rogue. Maybe it's like High Rogue tier 3. Somewhere here. Yeah, that's where I feel like it is. Because I can't really argue that if I'm going to argue Inferno in the same spot, so... They're kind of like grouped together at this point. Yeah, this is pretty good where everything is. Okay. Speedroid is worse than Wimwitch. It's like down here. Again, kind of the same problems Wimwitch has. You know, being into that same spot where you make that turn 1, you lose to Eclipse, you lose to Droplet. And yeah. And if your opponent's smart and they discard a spell, you won't be able to Lance Protect anything either. So, that's kind of where I think that is. Okay, next I feel is Altergeist. Altergeist is probably around here. I need Crimson really for this one. Crimson, you better comment on this. But it's actually quite decent, I would say. Maybe I move this like this. Yeah, like this. Because, like, Altergeist can... Well, you're not going to play IDP, but Konkiri can negate the attack, and I believe it does not target. I believe Conk doesn't target Crimson and negate the effect. So, Crimson, please comment and tell me if I'm right or wrong. But other than that, like, Multi-Faker is really good. Silk does target, but overall, you can still bounce other things that aren't targeting. And they can run a bunch of back rows, so I'm going to put them at, like, mid-rogue right now, but... Yeah, Crimson, feel free to move this up and down the tier list as you see fit, because you're much better at the deck than I am. You are the goat of Altergeist. Okay, Live Twin Dogmatica is actually a decent deck. This deck is actually a high tier rogue, and it can actually do really well because you can run Nibiru, which helps counter the birds, Droplet, which helps counter the birds, basically any tech you want in the deck. So, overall, Live Twin, this is kind of what I said before. Live Twin and Shaddoll with both Dogmatica are a lot stronger variants of the deck. They're just playing like Dogmatica by itself or like a Charmer version of the deck. But yeah, really, really good. This is where I feel the tier list is right now. This is where I feel. Right now, we have Lyra being the best deck, Star Seraph and then Borrel. Tier 2, I feel like Shark and kind of like Time Thief kind of get in there. I think Shark is kind of underrated a bit. It's kind of like this. Well, I don't know. And then like Unchained, all these other decks kind of sit behind it. I feel like Shaddoll is in there. I feel like Shaddoll is slept on. So I'm going to put it in there. If I'm going to argue like Sun Avalon being slept on, I'm going to argue Shaddoll. But yeah, this is what I feel the tier list is. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed this video, like, comment, subscribe. We're doing Master Duel tonight. So, I hope you're all there. Appreciate it. See you soon. Bye, YouTube.